listener questions and answers on episode 290 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers who love looking up at the night sky and asking, what are your questions? Anybody who ever wants to send us a question, you can always email us at actualastronomy@gmail.com. Always happy to hear from folks. Hey, Shane?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's part of the fun of making the podcast. I do enjoy the emails.
Yeah, so we had a few questions over the holidays. Some mount challenges somebody was facing, travel telescope questions, and actually a few questions about the DII red LED lights. But first, how are you feeling, Shane? I think I read in one of the replies to another listener that you were going to go and try to get some observing in last night.
Yeah, I did some observing in the afternoon and in the evening. It was a rare clear day here, so, or at least in the south it was clear. So I pulled out the solar telescope probably mid-afternoon, Hydrogen Alpha, and I forgot how low the sun is this time of the year, because normally I do my solar observing from the backyard. But my neighbor's house was blocking the view of the sun because of how low it was. So I had to transition to the front driveway. And just a typical Hydrogen Alpha session, lots of filaments and surface detail, although not as much prominence detail as I was hoping for. But what I was really wanting to catch was a few days ago. So we're recording today, it's January 8th. Earlier this past week, there was a huge ejection off the sun. It didn't come towards Earth, but it was expected to sort of make itself visible as it rotated around towards like midweek, end of week. So I was just wanting to observe a little bit of that, that region. But the conditions just weren't that great during the day, so I didn't spend a lot of time actually doing solar observing. But then in the evening, I took the TSA 102 out and the Bino viewers and had another look at Mars. I went out later for this session than I did earlier in the week, so Mars was much higher, and it was nearly at zenith. Seeing was pretty darn good, actually. Atmosphere was pretty stable up there, although humidity was really high. It was like 93% last night, and that definitely impacted the views. But the atmosphere allowed a lot of magnification. Like I was using about 150 times, which that's not always attainable here. Those are good nights. And again, all of those albedo features were super visible, right from Syrtis Major all the way down and through to Graph, kind of on the limb.
Nice.
It was really good. Really enjoyed it. Although it's getting so, Mars is shrinking enough that I'm finding it challenging really to pull out much more detail other than kind of just identifying the albedo features, but not really seeing variations or detail within those features, which, other years at opposition, you can start to tease some of that out. But nonetheless, it was fun. Had a quick look at Jupiter, but anything low, the localized seeing was just killing it. Radiating heat from rooftops and all of that kind of stuff was just not good. I was able to split Rigel. Sirius wasn't visible to me, and even if it was, it would have been too low when I was out to really attempt to split there. So then I took a look at the moon. I think it was like one day past full, and it's kind of neat. Along the terminator, there was a fairly large crater that looked like a layered burger or a layered sandwich, where there'd be like a row of like bright illuminated kind of moon grayness, and then a black line all the way through, and then above the black line another slice of moon grayness. And there's about 4 or 5 stacks like this in this one crater. It was super neat, and I have no idea what I was looking at. So I'm going to wait for some images to come out this week, because as people image the moon,
Yeah.
they process them and release them. But there's usually a few days of delay there. But I'm hoping somebody caught that image from January 7th, and very curious what I was looking at. But it was neat. I don't recall seeing that before.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun. So how about you? Were you able to get out, or your cold battle is not allowing you?
Yeah, I thought about it last night. I actually went out and checked on my cabin yesterday, and I thought about going out last night, but I'm just not quite there. It's still a little bit in cough recovery mode here. So I actually found some observations.
Yeah, you were mentioning you're doing some cleaning up and came across some old stuff.
Yeah, trying to get I record in like the spare room, which is my office, podcast studio, has a bed in it. Everything an astronomer needs. So yeah, I found some old sketches of unaided moon observations that I'd done, like in the morning sky, when the sky is kind of that sort of deep, sort of like kind of getting towards like a pale blue. And anyway, so I had done them on some pale blue paper. I'd almost forgotten about those. And then I found some of NGC 6231, the false comet down in Scorpius, which I thought I'd lost. So I did a set of them in 2016 because always wanted to see it, like a good observation of it, not just a glance at it. I remember when I lived in Ontario glancing at it a few times. But when I was in Hawaii, I sketched it when I was up on Haleakala. And then I did a good sketch of that sketch. And then when I was in Nova Scotia back a few months after that, again back in 2016, I wanted to see if I could get it from there to actually see it from Nova Scotia. So I was able to get a good sketch in of it from the coast there. So anyway, I had all these sketches, but darn if I could remember where I put them, and they were just on a shelf in amongst like other papers that I would just never sort of dive into. So anyway, pretty excited to kind of have uncovered that. So NGC 6231 is false comet, and then there's what's called the Prawn Nebula nearby, and the false comet is just a grouping of stars sort of towards the bottom of the stinger of Scorpius, like right in, basically at in and amongst the lowest extremity of the Scorpion's stinger. And anyway, it's below the horizon for us here. Like it never rises, but it just barely is below the horizon by maybe just half a degree or something. So you don't have to go too much further south for it to rise. And it's very bright. So anyway, just nice to be able to dig those up. Yeah, kind of fun going through all that stuff, even when I wasn't feeling well.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. So cleaned up the office, trying to get things rolling. We had a couple hiccups today, I guess, when I installed Zoom on the new computer or was messing around with it. It seems like it changed the password on you. So my apologies for that.
Yeah, no problem. We got it figured out, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm on a now dedicated machine. I haven't actually had like a full-on proper computer in a number of years. So, I've been just sort of using whatever was handy, but I bought a refurbished MacBook Air to be dedicated to the podcast, and have podcasting software running on it and my audio interface running into it. So nothing else I have is powerful enough to run all this stuff. So I was trying to, and everything would just die. I could only run either my earphones or the microphone, or nothing else had enough power. So it's all going pretty good. And then I think once you do the output, I think you put it in through Audacity and do some light editing there before they go live. Isn't that how we're doing it?
Sort of. I don't use Audacity. I use an app called Fairlight. And I've been using that since day one, and it's awesome. I do it all on my iPad, and it has some filters and some things that clean up the levels and audio a little bit, and doesn't take very long, but it allows us to add the intro and the outro, and once in a blue moon we actually have to do an edit to the audio, but that's exceptionally rare.
Like that time I spilt my coffee on me.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. Cool. Cool. Yeah. So we're making some improvements here. I'm pretty happy. I like to be able to watch my levels. Because so with this device, it has these two green scales when I speak. And in the past, what we were finding is that my voice can drop off. And I have a bit of asthma and I have a cold right now. And I was really happy with the last podcast we did, even though it was a short one. If I didn't have the system running, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I wouldn't be able to see my levels, and I would have been all over the map and way, way, way too quiet. But here I can kind of watch where it is. And if it starts dropping off, I just know that I'm moving too far away from the mic, and I just sort of, training myself just to adjust. But one thing I was trying to get running here is I thought I'd be able to put you through this as well. But I think, like I was saying, I have to get a patch cable or something like that. So then I can actually run Shane through this and make our levels match. So make for less work in the post-production for what work there is.
Very interesting.
For those that are interested. Maybe not everybody is, but I'm into podcasting too. So this is just like my other little hobby, but I'm more into astronomy. So before we go too far down that rabbit hole. Yeah. All right. We'll get some questions here, Shane, that they're pretty good, but first we should do a shout out to Bob, I think, because he had sort of something interesting to say. He got an article published in the February edition of Sky and Telescope.
Yeah. So Bob wrote, hey guys, just a quick note to blow my own horn. Check the last page of the February 2023 Sky and Telescope and see my article in that issue's focus. I'm thrilled that they accepted it. Love your podcast, Bob K.
Yeah, congratulations, Bob. That's super cool. I think he must have sent that it's like an observing report just after the hurricane went through. And then because it seemed very familiar to me. And so anyway, I thought that was really nice that they printed it. He's been a long time subscriber to the magazine, long time listener of ours as well. So really cool to see. And yeah, not blowing your own horn at all. Yeah, if other people are getting out and published places, let us know, because if that's the case and it's something maybe I don't subscribe to, I will go and pick up that magazine just because somebody who listens to us is getting published somewhere else. I think that's super cool.
Oh, for sure it is. Yeah, it's quite a, I'd say an honor, to be published. So congrats, Bob.
Yeah, it is super cool. Yeah, it's always fun to see your stuff in print and to be included. And it's one of the things we like to do as well, is to put the people that are listening to us in our podcast, because people come up with all kinds of great questions that we would never think of creating an episode around. And one of them came in from Berta, who's a more recent listener, and kind of meshes well with Bob's, where maybe I was tooting our horn a bit, Shane, and then she wrote us back. So maybe I'll just read this.
Yeah, go for it.
Berta writes, hi, Chris and Shane. First of all, Happy New Year to you both. Thanks for putting the work that you do to create the actual astronomy podcast. I recently discovered it as Chris recommended it on the Astro Sketchers RASC forum, and I am hooked. I hear that you both use refractors, and I have a question, maybe a podcast episode. There you go. I do have a 4-inch NexStar SLT refractor that I upgraded the mount to a more sturdy Celestron Omni German Equatorial, which I love. Fine picture attached. So I should have put it in the notes. But Berta sent us a really cool photo, because it looks just like my backyard too, where there's a lot of snow down, and she's got her 4-inch, I think it's like an F5 refractor on an EQ4 mount, for those that are familiar with it. And it looks like it's a manual mount. Berta goes on to say, now I tried to look at Mars yesterday in Auriga, as you recommended in your January episode, but the scope ended up touching the tripod legs and I couldn't. How do you solve this problem? She writes, my good friend Alistair Ling from the Edmonton Center, she lives in Edmonton, recommended turning the scope upside down, which works, although it is a little bit awkward, and the slow-mo controls of the mount end up being on the other side. Anyway, do you have any other advice or trick for this? Thanks in advance, Berta. So I think that's actually pretty good advice from Alistair. I know Alistair a little bit. Alistair is the person who writes for a long time the sort of what's up in the night sky for the astronomy magazine, the U.S. edition of astronomy magazine. He's been a long-time member of the RASC, and yeah, sometimes somebody that I will go to for some advice and support as well. But Shane, did you have any thoughts on this one before I kind of give what I wrote?
Yeah, I did reply, and I forgot to CC our account, so you probably didn't.
No worries.
Didn't see it, but I ran into this problem too a long time ago, and so probably the easiest way, I think, or maybe not the easiest way, but the way I solved it is my main mount is my Stellarvue M2C. It's a very basic alt-az mount. But it sits quite low on the tripod. So if you have a refractor, even if it's a short tube refractor, if you're trying to look too high, it would bang into the tripod leg. So you could kind of orient your tripod so that the leg isn't in the way, but that's, a massive pain. So what I did is I got the extension pier for that mount. So it's a tube that goes onto the tripod, and it raises the mount, I'd say 12 to 15 inches or so, maybe even 18 inches. I'm not sure. It raises it quite a bit, and it gives the telescope the clearance so that it's not banging into the tripod legs. The other thing is that the tube for this pure extension is quite solid, so it's not like it's going to be quite stable when I use it. You could fashion your own, but then you have to make sure you're using some pretty high gauge steel or metal of some kind to ensure stability there. But anyway, pure extension is what I recommended.
Yeah, that's kind of where I went at first as well, but then I was looking closely, and I think that's a solid recommendation, because if somebody's going to use refractors and they're using like the EQ4, and they're going to upgrade and maybe continue to use refractors, which I would, they're going to need more height anyway. It's just part of the territory, and I think the EQ4 can probably handle like a lightweight 5-inch instrument or a longer 4-inch if Berta went in that direction. But when I looked, I noticed this, and I had this with one of my scopes as well, is that looks like the 4-inch Nexstar SLT refractor comes with one of those bolted on dovetail plates. So instead of having a ring system or a ring or something like that, it has the dovetail directly attached to the tube. I'm actually looking at my I might even measure this just while we're here. So part of my knock it around here for a second. Hopefully I don't knock anything over, but I'm going to stand up. I'm actually going to measure my TAC FS60. I'm going to measure the distance from the tube to the top of the plate here. I know it's at least an inch. So I'm just going to do this. I've got a measuring tape right here, and yeah, it's 1 inch, maybe just over an inch. I would say it's probably an inch and an eighth of an inch. So what happens is that when you have the plate attached directly to the tube, especially on a short tube instrument, there's a couple things that occur. One is that the telescope is going to mount really close to the mount, and then you're going to just not have that extra inch and a little bit of room between the telescope and the legs when it swings up. So I don't know if adding tube rings and an external plate, and maybe either taking that off or mounting it in such a way around it. But anyway, you have to figure that out, or she'd have to figure that out. But also, I think it's worthwhile doing. I think that once you get to the point where you're buying a new mount and you're doing some other upgrades, I think getting a good set of rings and a plate are maybe one of those things that people sort of stave off from doing, because it's an expense. It's not really like a super fun and exciting thing. Like you're not going to go out and see something new or anything like that. It's not like buying an eyepiece or a diagonal or a new telescope, but the usability is going to increase. And one of the things that people probably aren't going to realize until they do it is that it's going to make the telescope a little bit easier to use, because you could get a mounting plate, and like with my FS60, even my mounting plate actually extends past the head of my focuser. And so by that, you're actually able to, use a lot of different eyepieces and have a lot of different balance range with the telescope, so that you can use bigger eyepieces, or maybe it's really smaller eyepieces, and you're able to balance them all by either moving the telescope up and down the tube, or by simply moving the dovetail plate up and down in your saddle, depending. So it just gives you some more flexibility as far as how you actually use the telescope. I don't know that it will be enough, though. I think your solution is sort of the slam dunk solution, Shane, where putting the pure extension on. And I think the pure extension for the, I think it's the EQ4 that she has there, at least that's what it looked like when I looked at it, is the same as the EQ5. So you'd have to verify that with a retailer. I'm sure they would be happy to do it. And then that would give you the height. Personally, if it was me, I would do both. I would get the pure extension, because you're solving the problem there. But then as well, to be able to mount that telescope up like that, just going to make it a little bit more usable, because those are nice little telescopes. They've been making those 4-inch f5s for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think most mounts, and maybe that's an exaggeration, but I don't think so, but I believe most mounts sell pure extensions. So if you need that extra little bit of height, you can get that. So, even if you're like, if somebody else is maybe having the same issue and you don't have the same mount mounts that we're talking about, there still might be some pure extensions available for you if you look into it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you can just contact the mount manufacturer, go onto their website. Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, just be careful. Like, make sure you verify it first, whatever you have. I know Ioptron has them. And then there's a lot of generic ones, because I think like the Celestron, Skywatchers, Orions, a lot of those are more or less like the same mount. They're going to have more or less the same threads and all that stuff, but you'd have to make sure you were verifying that first. But that's a really good question, though. That's super practical. Actually had a very similar issue with the telescope that I bought for my nephews, because it's the ST80 version from Skywatcher. And I think I ended up leaving the plate on that one. But when I was using it on my mount, I took it off and had modified it. But I ended up getting a Skywatcher mount specifically for that telescope that worked fine. So sometimes, like, depending on what you're doing, you can find a telescope mount that will work with those type of plates. But I think in this instance, I think it's a good idea to get that pure extension, or to get rings, or if some Christmas money came in, the new Takahashi telescope comes in white, it would look really beautiful on that white EQ4.
Yeah, it would. Another benefit too of the pure extension that I never thought of until I actually bought it and started using it is I don't extend my tripod as high, because the extension gets the telescope to the right height anyway.
Yeah.
And I think I've gained a little bit of stability that way, because one of the weak points of any tripod is extending the legs. And if you extend them all the way to the maximum, usually that's, the least stable the tripod will be. So keeping the legs not extended, because you have the pure extension up top, I think makes it just a little bit more of a stable platform.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing I'm thinking about, just as you're talking, excuse me, is that you're a taller person, Shane. And how might that play into this as well? Maybe you can speak from that height.
Yeah. Like if I want to stand and observe, which I don't do a ton of, but that pure extension, again, it just helps get that telescope to the right, level for me. And, what I found with a lot of tripods, like, unless you're getting some of the really, really long, like burlapbacks, a lot of tripods don't go like really high. So if you want to stand and observe, you probably need this depending on your height. But, for me, I have no regrets of buying that pure extension. Many, many benefits were realized by getting it.
Yeah. I do have one on my Burlapback tripod as well. Just
Mhm.
they can come in handy to keep the weight down. Like it's on my like super portable travel edition, and yeah, it is super handy. Cool. Anything else on this one for Berta?
No, that's it.
All right, we had Julian. He sent an email just to me, but I put it in the show notes and I made sure I got these out to you sooner this time. And Julian is going to be traveling, I think in early 2024, and so that's about a year from now, and kind of timely since I had just traveled and went through a lot of debate whether I would take my TAC 60 FS, which I've taken on several trips with me before, but this time I opted just to tuck my binoculars in, and boy, when I got to the Pearson airport, I was sure happy I'd done that. We had to take 4 flights over the holidays to get back and forth from where we were going. I think it was just 4, but we ended up getting delayed by 28 hours at one point. And we walked downstairs, or took the escalator downstairs to get our bags in Pearson there. And I estimated there was several thousand either abandoned or lost pieces of luggage there, and a line longer than that to Disneyland for getting your bag attended to. Anyway, it was a real mess. So what I did is I just took my binoculars and decided to use my nephew's ST80s, which I had sent down during the pandemic, and that worked out pretty good. So I was pretty happy with that because they got to come over and I got to observe with them. But Shane, have you traveled with telescope yet, or just taken binoculars, or what's your been experience with this so far?
Well, I've done both. I've taken my old 80 millimeter William Optic refractor on multiple trips. Trying to think if I've taken any other telescopes. No, I don't think so. That one was my portable telescope at the time when we were traveling. But more often than not, I would just take my Canon IS binoculars, the 12 by 36s. Binoculars I just love them on vacation because I use them during the day for sightseeing, and then I can use them at night for astronomy. And
yeah,
they get a lot of use whenever we go on vacation.
Yeah. I always like those Canon image stabilized binoculars. I always like stealing your views. And I've actually been on vacation before and then run into people with them. And I'm like, hey, those are the Canon blah, blah, blahs. And the person's always like super excited to say, here, have a look at this whale through them. So it's a lot of fun. All right. This email is going to speak to you, I think, because Julian has a lot of similar equipment that you do. So he wrote this one directly to me as well, just because we've had a sort of ongoing conversation about some of these really amazing art pieces that he creates. Anyway, Julian writes, my old, I know there's the cold coming through. My old South African friend and writer no longer lives in South Africa at the moment, but he visits there frequently. My partner and I have decided to travel with him to South Africa to peek at the southern skies in 2024, and he's super interested in looking up. When I said I'd bring along only my Canon 10 by 42 image stabilized binoculars, he said I should bring my telescope. I can't take my XT10. That's like a 10-inch Dobsonian, which is a pretty good sized piece of gear. But I can take the 81 millimeter, but it's going to be too long for carry-on luggage. So I thought to sell my 81 millimeter, and I think this must be one of the William Optics ones, and ask what your view would be of this quintuplet telescope, which is made by Askar, which is that 65 millimeter f6.4. He goes on to say, it would pass for carry-on luggage, and it might work in concert with your Wide Field Wonders, page 326 of the Observer's Handbook, which is my list there for wide field observing. With eyepiece and diagonal, I think it would be around 3 kilograms, which my photo tripod could just about handle, but not solidly. My AZ5 would be impossible to take in the cabin. In contradistinction, Damian Peach says he never had lost telescopes when he's checked them in for a flight. According to Matthew Hodgins in Alpha Lyrae, that's a website. People should check that out. Matthew Hodgins' Alpha Lyrae site. He goes on to say, triplets are useful as visual-only instruments. Do things get even better with quintuplets? And then he gave me a link to the Alpha Lyrae site, which I'm very familiar with. What might be your overall view of the Askar 65? I have not seen any reviews of it yet. And he goes on to say, here's where we're planning to go. And he sent this map. Have you any suggestions regarding South Africa? Any Astrolist groups we might contact? Would the Florida Keys be just as good? Cuba, Key Largo? Thanks again for any suggestions you have. Julian, what are your thoughts? Shane, where do you want to go? Where do you want to start with you?
First of all, apologies for coughing. I drank my coffee the wrong way and nearly drowned. So
I'm using my mute button quite judiciously here so that I don't do the same. Good stuff. No worries.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if I'd call it a dilemma, but situation anyway.
Yeah.
The only thing that kind of strikes me about a quintuplet telescope is just the weight. I think he referenced here 3 kilograms with everything. That seems light to me for a 65 millimeter telescope with 4 pieces of glass. But that would be my only concern, is I would probably still try to get like a doublet, just save the weight there. Possibly we've talked a lot about those Astrotech telescopes, Chris, that seem to have we've never looked through them, but they seem to have a really good following and really positive reviews. I think they make something in the 60 millimeter class as well as like a 71 millimeter.
Yeah.
So those are probably what I would have my eye on for this type of traveling. But I don't know much about the telescope he's referencing, that Askar 65. Have you researched it at all or read any reviews?
Yeah. So this telescope, from what I can tell, this telescope would be the same as one, I think Sharpstar. I think there was, and there was somebody else that had it out even before them. They had out the first edition. Now, I got to say, this is a telescope that I am extremely interested in. I think maybe even Alan Dyer had done a review of it at some point, if I'm remembering correctly. And it is a decent telescope, but I have, and I replied to Julian already, so he already has all my detailed thoughts. But I have a few concerns based on what I read in my research. So first of all, I was very interested in it because a quadruplet refractor at f6.4-ish or whatever is going to give you a really flat field of view. And that's going to give me like pretty much a perfect exopupil with my 40 millimeter Pentax XW, which is about my favorite eyepiece. That's just going to be like a match made in heaven. Really, it would be. These telescopes also are a fairly decent price. I think they're around $1,000 US. So they're about like 30% cheaper than a Takahashi FS60, which I already own. And when I was looking at getting the TAC FS60, this was in the debate pool. But I love Matt Hodgson's Alpha Lyrae site, and he's the one that convinced me to get the FS60 as sort of more of an ultimate travel scope. And I never end up looking through any of the 65 millimeter quintuples. There might have even been like an Astrotech version, now that I think about it.
Okay.
Anyway, regardless, this should be an awesome wide field instrument. But here are my concerns. A 65 millimeter quintuple, inherently, it's just going to be a heavier telescope. It's got 4 elements instead of 2. And that's just going to make for a heavier instrument. It's going to have a bigger cell. And that's just the nature of it. So by going to a simple doublet, and these days the doublets are pretty good. And with modern good wide field eyepieces, I know Julian has some decent eyepieces. He's not going to notice that much. I don't notice that much of a difference to my FS60 and when I use like a much longer focal length telescope. So that's just not as big a concern as the weight would be for traveling purposes. The other thing is that astro imagers have different requirements for telescopes than what we're going to have for just having a simple travel scope we're going to visually look through. And one of the shortcomings, and Shane, you and I have run into this because we buy telescopes that are used by astro imagers, because typically astro imaging telescopes are pretty good scopes. And that is that they're going to have a different configuration for having the focal point land on a camera sensor than for going into a diagonal and then up into an eyepiece. So you might have trouble focusing some of your eyepieces or all of your eyepieces. And that kind of challenge is going to be a bit of a showstopper to get the kinks worked out of and to maybe use when one is traveling. Not saying that you can't do it. You and I have both overcome a lot of weird and wacky focal point issues with the telescopes that we own, but it's not going to be as plug and play. It's going to be probably more of a challenge to get some eyepieces to focus. That might not be the case. Maybe Askar is knocked it out of the park, but there's no reviews. So it's an unknown at this point, and you would want to be getting that telescope pretty soon to get working on it, to work out those bugs, even though there's about a year of lead time here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The, like imaging telescopes, you typically need some sort of an extension to get eyepieces to focus for visual astronomy. And like my TSA 102 is a great example of that, actually, where the like it came with an adapter, like basically a tube that you screw into the focuser that is it's included for visual use. But if you're using a camera, you take that off, and then it just works better with the camera, because the camera doesn't need that type of focal length for focusing. The sensor is much closer than your eye would be if you're a visual observer with diagonals and eyepieces. But anyway, it's great if you're a bino viewer, because then it saves some of that light path for bino viewing. But yeah, for just regular mono viewing, it can be a bit of a nuisance.
Oh, I was also going to say this with the quintuple, Shane. I might be a little bit worried about keeping all those elements aligned, especially considering this telescope is going to be a travel telescope, right? It's going to get. You should have seen the stuff that was in my luggage and how knocked around it was by the time we got back here. So I'd be concerned. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And then maybe the last one too that I'll make is just, I don't know what the temperature differences would be like between indoors and outdoors, but you certainly have a lot more cool down time, or we'll just call it acclimatization time. Maybe it has to heat up even.
Maybe,
But a quad instrument will take it'll take longer than what a doublet would take. That's for sure.
Yeah. Now, considering there's no reviews in this, a lot of this is simply conjecture. This telescope might be well designed for cooling, might be slightly lighter weight than what we think it might be. It might have just a beautiful lens cell design. And so with that, I'm just going to say, if this gets into the ears of Askar, just please send one over, because I honestly have had my eye on the various incarnations of this telescope for many years. And I would love to have a flat field 65 millimeter f6.4 telescope, because and I may even try one at some point. Now, if I go to a star party and somebody has one, that's going to be a telescope I try to arrange to look through with my equipment, because that could be a telescope for me just to have on the shelf for sure, because that would just be beautiful wide fields, super wide fields, and sharp to the edge. I'd be super excited to view through that. So if Askar is out there, they're looking for somebody to do a review, send her our way. We can share a telescope, Shane. They don't have to send us two.
Yeah, that's fair.
we end up settling on a recommendation of one of the 72 millimeters, either like Shane was saying from Astronomics, one of the Astrotech 72 EDs, or like a Skywatcher 72 ED. And I think he's leaning on the latter one there. So I think that's a pretty good solid way to go, because by all accounts, those are excellent telescopes. And I've looked through some of the other ones, just not the really small ones. So I should put that in. All right. Anything else to add to Julian's question and correspondence there?
No, that's it.
All right. Head email there from Tom. Do you just want to go ahead and do you mind giving that one a read, Shane? But while I take my leave.
Yeah, for sure. And just a refresh, Tom has been on the podcast before. He built that super fast Dobsonian telescope called Artemis. Sorry. In his email, he says, excuse me, "Hey guys, Merry Christmas to both of you and your families. While the break sort of sucked over here because we all got COVID leading into Christmas, I love the Sue French book that came under the tree. Too bad the skies are not cooperating while I'm off from work. Someone should record each article so that you can listen to it while observing, having an over-the-shoulder guide as you follow along. Quick question.
I thought about, sorry, I got to hop in and say, I thought about reaching out to Sue French. I'm on a list serve with her, and she doesn't know who I am or anything, but I thought I should reach out to her and that would be it. That's a really good idea. I like that idea a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We should talk to Sue French about recording some of those. I think that would be super neat. I wonder if she'd be up for it in her retirement.
I've often thought, like, some of these astronomical guides would be outstanding audiobooks, because then you could listen to them while you're out in the field. But I love that idea.
Cool.
So Tom goes on to say, quick question. Do you have a link or photo or anything on that DIY red, yellow, white light project that a listener had created? I am okay with the light that I have, but a more ergonomic one would be helpful, as would yellow versus red. Hopefully I'll get a few nights in during January and send some observing notes. Happy New Year.
Thanks for that, Tom. Yeah, I really appreciate that. He was the third or fourth person to write or ask about that. I think during the past 5 or 6 weeks since Wade sent in his photos and we talked about it. I did ask Wade. I think he's a little busy right now, but I did ask him for some detailed specs, because, and I think we talked about this before, Shane, in general, we've been less than satisfied personally, or at least I have, with the current offerings of LED lights that are out there, and maybe we're just missing something. But for me, the best one that I've found, and I'm gonna give a very stringent recommendation, is I've been using the Rigel Systems red/amber custom dual light. But the amber side pretty much broke because I use my light a lot and I'm really not careful with my light. So I'm not like blaming Rigel Systems or anything. I beat the heck out of my light. And then I use the amber quite a bit. But if I was to do it again, and my recommendation for listeners, if you want the best off the shelf one that you can get, just buy a single Rigel Systems red light. If you want another color light, get another color light, get a separate light. I think this business of these dual beams is not great. I don't think it works. It works as well. Just single purpose lights. I think that's my recommendation. And the reason why I like the Rigel Systems lights is I don't know why all these red flashlights have like these strange curves and contours to them. They look like, I don't know what they look like. They look like they're not round, they're not flat, and I just want to lay it flat. So the Rigel Systems one is a bit of a rectangle, and it works well. I put it down on my paper and I can sketch using it without messing around with it too much. But most of the other ones, no, not as good. And or often the ones that are decently shaped, like I know there was more square and rectangular ones in the past than there seems to be now. But darn it, if those ones aren't like absolutely made out of the cheapest materials possible, and like the potentiometer always comes apart, the lens glass always falls out, it's just like, I don't mind spending like $100 on a really good flashlight, and the Rigel Systems are getting up there. But, I just want a decent red flashlight. Can maybe people out there, maybe somebody else has already solved this problem or has a recommendation. I think the Rigel Systems one is the best one I've been able to find. But what are your thoughts on all this, Shane?
Yeah, I concur. There's not an ideal flashlight out there for me, and I've spent a lot of time looking for a nice amber light that's fully dimmable, and came up unsuccessful essentially. So I stick with my standard red flashlight, Skywatcher brand. I can dim it all the way down to like no light at all, so it's infinitely variable. Runs on a 9-volt, so it lasts a long time. It works fine. I have no complaints. I would still like to get a dimmable amber light, but they just don't seem to really exist. So I guess I'll bide my time and hopefully somebody produces something. Maybe I do what Wade did and just get the right parts and put something together.
Yeah. Rigel Systems will make you one, but like I said, they're not cheap. And the biggest downside for you and I, Shane, is I think half the cost was actually getting it here into Canada. So I think maybe it's going to run you around $50 for a single one. Canadian. I should have looked at the price, but it doesn't matter. They're not cheap, but they're good. And but then you got to pay. Like shipping was $25, and then I think I got nailed with tax and duty and blah blah blah. So I think I was like really up into like the $80-$90 range by the time mine get in the door here, and it worked great for a while. And like I said, I banged it around like my light gets banged around a lot at night, and I think I observed like 150 nights with it, and then the orange stopped working. So it's just a red flashlight now. So I would say get the red version of the Rigel one if you want the best one off the shelf. Maybe there's another one out there. People write me, let us know at actualastronomy@gmail.com. And then, I think that's the best one that's available. But I feel like this is a problem that could be solved by the group of people that we're talking to right now. There's a lot of handy folks out there. And I like what Wade has done because it's flat. And he has a few different options, but each light option that he has a different switch. And the problem that I think my Rigel Systems dual beam had was it uses the same switch for both. And there's it's just too much use of the same switches to switch over back and forth. So then I think it really is just basically stuck on the red now. So anyway, any further thoughts on that? I think we need help. We need help from our community.
Yeah, I really don't have anything else to add to that.
All right. Losing my voice here a little bit. And I think we're getting close to time. I think we did pretty good. We did pretty good here. What are we, I think we did good here this morning, don't you?
46 minutes, Chris.
That's pretty good considering where we were on Thursday. And we did a short recording on Thursday, and I coughed so much afterwards. Not a word of a lie, I actually cracked one of my ribs. So yeah, I'm not doing too bad. So anything else to add to the whole episode?
Nope. That's it, Chris.
All right. Well, thanks, Shane. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for putting up with us. We're still getting over these colds. And if you enjoyed this podcast, like John did, leave us a review. Thanks, John. Thanks for sending us that review. I know you had a little trouble getting it submitted. Maybe it got cut off and maybe gave an intention you weren't otherwise looking for. But I think it's great. And I think that maybe other people can sort of build on that. And we would appreciate it if anybody else can do us the same favor John did and leave us a 5-star rating and say something fun and positive about this show, because that will increase the chances that other people like you are going to find Actual Astronomy in 2023. And we're always happy to get your observing reports and questions to actualastronomy@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.